Around 2.3 billion people globally lack access to modern and sustainable cooking equipment. 900 million of these people live in Sub-Saharan Africa. This is a global challenge causing health problems from indoor air pollutions, deforestation, and greenhouse gas emissions. The Modern Cooking Facility for Africa increases access to clean cooking solutions in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. Our goal is to enable access to higher-tier cooking solutions for up to 4 million people by the end of 2027.
The Modern Cooking Facility for Africa is a program focusing only on higher-tier cooking solutions. The program supports a broad range of cooking technologies as the facility manager, Nefco, the Nordic Green Bank, strives for impact. The Modern Cooking Facility for Africa uses results-based financing to incentivize companies to scale up their clean cooking solutions. This way, they are committed to reach agreed milestones and make a real impact in the local communities.
The Modern Cooking Facility for Africa increases access to affordable and clean energy. The program also supports gender equality and new employment opportunities in the project countries.
The Modern Cooking Facility for Africa is a co-created program between Sweden and Nefco. It supports companies to scale up and reach underserved populations. We envision that our support will catalyze market development of a similar scale that's been seen in the off-grid electricity sector in the last decade. We're excited about the program and are looking forward to seeing the impacts on the ground.
Visit moderncooking.africa and learn more about our program and the impact of clean cooking solutions. moderncooking.africa.
Hi, and welcome to the Modern Cooking Facility for Africa webinar. My name is Jaunary. I am Communications Manager at Nefco and your webinar host today. We are very happy to have so many of you join us online to hear about our financing program for clean cooking solutions in Sub-Saharan Africa. During this webinar, you will learn what the Modern Cooking Facility for Africa is about and how does the program support clean cooking solutions. You will also get practical information to support with your funding application. As for the agenda of our webinar, so we'll start with the program background and objectives through an interview with the MCFA team members. After that, we will dive deeper into the ongoing funding round and practical information related to the application process. And towards the end, there will be a Q&A session where we will tackle the questions that you sent beforehand online. You can also ask questions during this webinar by using the chat window, and we will answer them in the end. A couple of housekeeping rules before we begin. So the webinar is being recorded and it will be available on our website afterwards. And as I mentioned, you can use the chat to ask questions throughout the webinar. And you can find the chat on the right-hand side of the window. And when typing your questions, please include your country, as that will help us answer your question. So let's begin. So we will start with the short interview with the MCFA team members. And I have here with me in the studio Head of MCFA, Ash Sharma, and Program Manager, Heli Sinkko. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you.
Okay.
First, I think it would be interesting for the audience to hear about your role. So Ash, maybe you go first.
Okay, thank you, Annie. Just to introduce myself again, my name is Ash Sharma. I'm in charge of the Modern Cooking Facility for Africa. But we have a nice team around us working to administer this fund. And first of all, my colleague Heli Sinkko, who's in charge of the day-to-day running of the fund. She's the MCFA program manager. You'll meet Emma later on. She's the program officer. working closely with this fund. We also have a number of program managers, Kadi and Aliona, who are managing some of the individual investments. We have also Petra, who is our monitoring, evaluation and learning manager. We have a dedicated legal counsel working on the contracts and administration. And we have a very capable communications team, which includes yourself, Annie, but also Leah and Gloria.
Thank you. And Heli, would you like to also present?
Yes,
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. So my name is Heli Sinkko, and I'm the program manager at Nefco for the MCFA program, as Shed, involved with the day-to-day management of the program.
Great to have both of you here. So let's begin with the question about the beginning of the program. So the Modern Cooking Facility was launched in 22. So what can you tell us about the background and why was it important to create a new program for clean cooking solutions?
Okay, thank you. Just to say a few words really about Nefco before I begin. Nefco is an international financial institution which has been established by the 5 Nordic countries. And we, in essence, manage external funds on behalf of our owner governments, the Nordic countries, the European Union, the Green Climate Fund and other external actors. For some years now, 5 years, we've been working with an instrument called the Beyond the Grid Fund for Africa, which has been a successful results-based financing instrument, which has been working on access to electricity, which is an important component of the Sustainable Development Goal number 7, SDG 7. So together with our main development partner, Sweden, in this case the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA, we noted that the other side of the SDG 7 coin, clean cooking, access to modern clean cooking, was pretty much underdeveloped, despite the huge impacts on health, particularly as they relate to women and children, and on the natural environment, particularly through deforestation and the impact on forests through the use of firewood and charcoal. So we felt that while significant progress has been made, the clean cooking sector has been underdeveloped, and there are few actors, companies, which are active in this area, particularly private sector companies, which have proven scalable business models. And it remains pretty underfunded as well. So together with Sweden, who funded a scoping exercise that explored the opportunities to incentivize private companies in selected Sub-Saharan African countries to develop and sell clean cooking technologies with a particular focus on higher tier uses, so higher tier, more sustainable technologies. And the result of this was a scoping phase, which then resulted in a program design, which led to the Modern Cooking Facility for Africa as a co-creation between Sweden and Nefco. And we felt that this would be an important separate instrument to the one that we are currently working with, the Beyond the Grid Fund for Africa, but as a complement to it.
Right. So you mentioned that Sweden funded the scoping phase, but what is the funding basis of the MCFA today?
Yes, you're right. The initial work was funded by Sweden through SIDA, and they were sufficiently convinced of the business case for this program that they provided an initial contribution of around 32 million euros to support the development and rollout of a program which is being managed by Nefco now, which is working now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Kenya, in Mozambique, in Tanzania, in Zambia and in Zimbabwe. And that program began in, as you said, in spring 2020. The program has now grown into a multi-donor program. We're very pleased that the European Union has joined in relation particularly to the Zambian country program. They joined in late 2022 with an additional 12.5 million euros. And at the recent COP28 climate conference in December, we were very happy to announce that Norway, through the Norwegian aid agency NORAD, joined the program with an additional 17 million euros. So in just over 2 years, the program has now grown into one of the largest results-based financing programs in the clean cooking sector. And we have total funding of around 62 million euros. But now we're looking to deploy that capital to accelerate green transition in the modern clean cooking space. We also want to demonstrate the viability of new business models and to bring cleaner, safer cooking solutions to millions of customers in Africa.
Thank you. As Ash mentioned, that the MCFA is one of the largest results-based financing programs in the clean cooking sector. And the next question to you, Heli, how does MCFA support the development of the sector?
You are absolutely correct. The MCFA essentially is a results-based financing program. That said, already in the scoping phase that, as mentioned, it was quite obvious that in most of the MCFA project countries, the clean cooking sector is not yet ready for a pure results-based financing program. In general, the clean cooking companies need more catalytic support compared to, for example, the investees in the BGFA program. While the investees in MCFA are selected based on their capacity to deliver their sales or the results-based targets, a certain proportion of the MCFA funding can be provided as a non-reimbursable catalytic grant. Then, in addition to these financial incentives, the MCFA also offers technical support on business and operations development, among others, and as well as on carbon finance, which is an important aspect.
Let's talk about actually carbon finance a little bit. So carbon finance has been said to be the game changer for the private clean cooking sector. How does the MCA work in relation to that opportunity, Ash?
Yes, thank you. We do believe that this carbon finance can be a critical element, as you said, a game changer in terms of the economics, the project economics for clean cooking technologies. The carbon finance can provide a significant additional revenue stream to these projects, and can, in many cases, lower the prices that are being offered to end users, particularly in rural areas where there's a significant affordability gap. So we would like, through the program, through the MCFA program, to support our investees, the companies that we work with, to enable access to carbon finance. The larger companies that we work with, they currently already incorporate carbon finance into their business models. But we do know that many of the smaller ones in particular do face financing barriers, which we hope to overcome by providing certain incentives, for example, for the use of stove use monitoring technologies, which can be critical to enabling the next generation of carbon markets. As Heli mentioned, we're also able to provide technical assistance using consultants who are very experienced in this market to the portfolio companies. And we look forward to supporting these companies going forward.
Then if we'll talk about the funding rounds. So the first funding round was launched in 2022. So Heli, can you tell us a bit about that and the outcomes?
Yes, the first call for proposals was launched in April 2022 and concluded in February 2023 with the shortlisting of highest ranking final applicants. Today we have contracted 9 investee companies in all of the project countries. However, some of these have not yet been publicly announced. In addition, we are very happy that with this new funding from Norway, we have been able to proceed to due diligence for some applications that remained on the reserve list in the first call. We hope to be able to announce these companies before the end of the first half of this year. I think the 3 major outcomes of the first funding round are that we will have a portfolio of 15 companies altogether. We we will allocate over 26 million euros of funding to these companies. But most importantly, these companies will provide access to clean cooking services to over 750,000 end customers in these countries.
And now there's an ongoing funding round, and there have been some important changes after the first funding round. So, Heli, can you tell us about these changes and what motivated them?
In the first funding round, we made available some 30 million euros to the investee companies. We were, however, not able to allocate all that funding, especially in DRC, Zambia and Zimbabwe, where the private clean cooking markets are less developed compared to, for example, the markets in Kenya or in Tanzania. It was therefore quite evident that we would need to return to the market and make some adjustments. Last year, we commissioned an early evaluation of the first funding round, which looked into the MCFA funding offer and as well as the eligibility requirements in the first call. One of the key takeaways of that evaluation was that the funding offer would need to be better tailor-made to the market situation in each of the project countries. Another evident aspect was that we would need to lower the bar, especially for earlier stage companies, even if the purpose of MCFA is not to provide funding for startups, but to support the scale-up of proven clean cooking technologies and business models. In any case, the eligibility requirements, especially in terms of previous market experience or the co-financing requirements, have been softened in this second call. Probably the biggest visible change is that this funding in the second call is now offered in two distinct funding windows. The catalytic funding window will be available to applicants in DRC, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia and Zimbabwe, whereas the scale-up funding window, which is very similar to MCFA 1, the first call, is open also to applicants in Tanzania and Kenya. But we will talk more about the funding windows when we present the MCFA 2 in more detail.
Thank you, Heli, and thank you, Ash, for this interview. And next, we will hear more about the ongoing funding round and also practical information related to the application process. And you will hear that from Program Manager Heli Sinkko and Program Officer Emma Yrjölä. Emma, welcome on the stage.
Thank you.
But first, Heli will tell about the funding offer and criteria.
Thank you, Anni. So let's proceed to the most important topic of today. So the second MCFA funding round was launched in the end of November last year. And as mentioned, it will provide funding of up to 16 million euros under two distinct funding windows. As I mentioned, the catalytic funding window and the scale-up funding window. The catalytic window will be available to earlier stage companies in DRC, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia and Zimbabwe. The scale-up funding window is open to all applicants in all project countries. We have also some earmarked funding to companies in DRC, Zambia and Zimbabwe for clean cooking services provided with cleanest tier 3 to 5 technologies. We have discussed in the interview a bit about the MCFA components. How do we support our investee companies? Two modalities, financial incentives and technical assistance. The financial incentives for clean cooking services can be provided as a non-recoverable grant, up to 30 or 50%, depending on the funding window, and the rest as results-based financing, which is deployed on a grant basis as a sort of free equity. So the uses of MCFA funding are not earmarked to specific uses, but can be used to expand the distribution network for recruitment or for stock purchasing. The RBF funding is then paid against achieved sales of clean cooking services, which are monitored and verified. Technical assistance provision is always tailor-made to each company's needs. It is in any case focused on business coaching, mentoring services, but also on gender mainstreaming, which is an important aspect of the MCFA program. Then, as mentioned, we also want to support companies' access to carbon finance, and this can also be done through technical assistance. Ash mentioned earlier that this is focused on higher tier technologies. So the eligible technologies are really tier 4 and 5 stoves using electricity, solid and liquid biofuels, LPG in selected countries, as well as biogas solutions. In addition to that, we have the opportunity to support tier 3 and above gasifier and forced draft rocket stoves using sustainable briquettes and pellets. We also want to specially incentivize stove use monitoring, as well as business models that incorporate pay-as-you-go, or so-called integrated tool and fuel models, where the applicant, or together with a consortium partner, provides both the stove and the fuel to the customers. And one technical aspect to highlight is that all supported technologies need to meet the above-mentioned tier ratings for efficiency, for emissions and safety based on the latest ISO standard from 2018 or relevant technology-specific benchmarks. But if we then move to the funding windows in more detail, the catalytic funding window makes available up to 3 million euros to companies in selected project countries. The ticket size can vary between 500,000 up to 1.5 million, and 50% of this MCFA total funding can be paid as non-reimbursable catalytic grant. We have certain co-financing requirements, and in this MCFA call, the additional co-financing should match the RBF part of the funding. The scale-up funding window consists of up to 13 million euros of funding available in all eligible project countries for the second call. Ticket size is a bit larger than in the catalytic funding window, ranging between 1 million euros and 2.5 million euros. As in the first call, up to 30% of the total MCFA funding can be paid in advance as a catalytic grant. And same as in the catalytic funding window, the co-financing should match the RBF part of the funding. Some more details on the co-financing requirements in MCFA. So the minimum requirement is matching co-financing matching the RBF part of MCFA funding. This doesn't need to be secured from day one, but half of that should be committed by the time when we make the first payment of MCFA funds. Then the rest of needed co-financing will be added as a fundraising plan to the agreement and as milestones. So who can apply for MCFA funding? The applicant should be a private for-profit company included in the register for for-profit companies in the project country. It can apply MCFA funding individually or on behalf of a project consortium. It should be registered in the project country, or at least be committed to register as such before any contract signing. So Nefco will only sign a contract with a locally registered company. There is an opportunity for non-profit entities or even public entities to join the project through a project consortium. But in any case, the consortium should be led by the applicant, which is a private company. Then there is an opportunity for an even more loose project partnership with the project partner, and these can be, for example, technology suppliers, microfinance institutions, or the like. We have some eligibility criteria for our applicants. The first of those is previous market experience. So from all applicants, we expect at least 12 months of previous relevant operational experience. We have included in this presentation a table directly from the application guidelines. We require certain previous sales experience from the applicants, and these are These are tailor-made for each of the funding windows, as well as each of the target groups of the clean cooking services. So please take a look at the application guidelines for details when determining which funding window you plan to apply. The second eligibility criteria for applicants is a certain financial position, which the applicant should meet based on their 2022 financial statements. The first one is a current ratio with a minimum value of 1 or higher, and an equity ratio of minimum 15%. In case the applicant does not meet these requirements, but is a subsidiary of a parent company, then the parent company's financials can be used to meet these criteria. I will stop here and pass the floor on to Emma, who will walk you through the application process and timeline.
Thank you, Heli. Let's talk more about the application process and timeline. This open funding round is a two-stage application process. First, we have this pre-qualification stage that is open at the moment, and the second stage is final application stage. Pre-qualification stage will be open until the end of this month, and the system closes at 12 Eastern European time. That's the ultimate deadline, and we don't receive applications after that. So I recommend everyone to note this time zone and time differences to your countries. So the deadline will be 31st of January. We are using an online application system, SmartME, so we receive applications through the system. For this pre-qualification stage application, we will ask for information about the applicant, its market experience and financial positions, including providing audited financial statements for 2022 and a short description for what is the funding used for. As Heli already explained about the eligibility criteria, this pre-qualification stage is about screening the eligibility criteria of the applicant. Here you can see a screenshot of the MCFA website. If you go to moderncooking.africa and press the above upper bar, apply for funding, you will find this form where you can register to the online application system. If you have already registered, you can log in through this same website. There is a provided link to access and log in the system. We have also created guidelines on how to register and log in the system. So we kindly recommend you to check our website for further guidance. Then a little bit more about the pre-qualification stage. There is two important deadlines. First deadline is for questions. We are receiving all questions related to the open funding round and pre-qualification stage in the online application system. The deadline will be tomorrow at 12 noon local time in Helsinki. So if you haven't registered yet, you should already now, after this webinar, register to be able to provide us questions. We will then compile them and answer all questions by 19th of January. So before the pre-qualification stage closes. And the deadline for applications at the PQ stage is the 31st of January at 12, as mentioned earlier. There are some screenshots on the right side of the slide where you can see how it looks like in the open application system. So you can provide questions through this support section and through this link that's in a circle, MCFA to pre-qualification stage Q&A. If you click that, you will find the form to provide questions. And then we will notify, after our eligibility check, we will notify those applicants that will be invited to the final application stage by 16th of February. This shows you, when you have logged in the system, where to apply funding. There is this green button, Apply Now. If you click that, you can find the application form. And on the left side, you can see that the selection is in this My Application, so you should click that first. And as Heli explained, we have 2 funding windows, and the system requires to choose which funding window, under which funding window are you applying for funding. So that's the first step, and then you can find the application form. This is not the full form, but this is the beginning of the form. There you can find links to the application guidelines. We have 3 language versions, in English, in French, and in Portuguese. There is also the link to the questions and answers when we publish it. The link will be then available. And the deadline is shown on the left side, the remaining days for the submission deadlines of the application. In this form, there is certain mandatory fields, some optionals, but those mandatory fields are marked in asterisk. And we highly recommend to save the draft frequently, not to lose any information. And then this final application stage will be relevant for those applicants that will be invited after the eligibility check for this final application stage. It's a similar kind of process. We have the questions and answers. The tentative timeline is shown on this slide. We will receive questions until 25th of March. And this is also at 12 noon local time in Finland. So please note these deadlines. They are exact times in certain time zones. And then we will provide later answers to those questions. And comparing to the pre-qualification stage, at the final stage, we have 2 parts in this final application stage. So there's 2 different submission deadlines. The first is for the business plans. That is a similar form, but not the same form as in PQ stage. And it will be filled in this Smart ME online application system. And then there's a second part that will be after ongoing, but the submission deadline is after the first part, where applicants are requested to provide their financial offers and results of laboratory testing of the stoves. And the deadlines you can see on this slide. But this will be then later. Then final application stage includes the evaluation of business plans. Ranking is done for each funding window using reverse auction mechanism. And then business plans are evaluated and scored by external evaluators. And those business plans that receive 60 points will qualify to calculation of a comparison score. The comparison score consists of the quality of the business plan that counts for 70%, and 30% consists of weighted cost, that is of the offered clean cooking service. And the incentive request for each offered clean cooking service will be weighted in line with the overall objectives of the MCFA too. And it's reflecting the proposed increase in quality, performance, and type of cooking services provided. There will be more information in the final application guidelines about this, so I'm not going into more details here. And this shows the business plan evaluation scoring criteria. There's some differences between the funding windows, but this is the general frame for evaluators to evaluate business plans. So there are some aspects regarding technical feasibility, fuel supply and availability, financing and additionality of the business plan, and also about human resources management capacity of the applicant, and also the important development, climate and environmental impact potential of the project. Then the selection. All final applications will be ranked based on the evaluation results separately for each funding window. And then applicants will be shortlisted based on the MCFA2 funding that is available for each window funding window. And there we have earmarked funding for certain countries under the scale-up funding window for DRC, Zambia and Zimbabwe. That will be taken into account in this shortlisting and ranking exercise. Then after that, we proceed to due diligence and contracting. Shortlisted applicants will be invited to due diligence, and it will be carried out by an external consultant in batches of 3 or 4 applicants at a time, and all contracts are subjected to a successful due diligence. After that, there will be also a no objection process from the donors, so that we can have an approval for contracting the projects. The timeline will be between June and December 2024.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
And next, it's time for your questions. So we received over 30 questions already before this webinar. Thank you for your active participation. And we have selected the most critical and the most frequently asked questions for our live session today. And a bit later, we will also pick some questions from the chat. But the first question is about the funding windows. So why is the catalytic funding window not available in Kenya or Tanzania?
Okay, thank you. I'll take that one. The evaluation that we undertook of the first call showed that the first call was very similar to the scale-up window and was very well suited actually to Kenya and Tanzania. As we said, it was a very high market response that we got, and it was concluded in the research that actually this was a very appropriate way to work with those countries. But we introduced the catalytic funding window in the other countries to increase the appropriateness of the MCFA funding towards the other countries where the market was less well developed and therefore at an earlier stage.
Thank you. Then a question about eligible applicants. So can new clean cooking companies or startups be considered for the funding?
I'll take this one. Yes, they can if they meet the eligibility requirements for the applicants. That said, the purpose of MCFA is to support the scale-up of higher-tier cooking technologies, and to do that efficiently, certain previous track record in terms of sales and financial position are required, as explained earlier during the presentation.
Thank you. Then a question about project partners. So is it possible to form a consortium between for-profit and not-for-profit organization, or even a consortium of 2 or more not-for-profit organizations?
Yes, it is possible to for an applicant which is a for-profit to form a consortium with a not-for-profit. That's fine. But the applicant must be a private company. So 2 not-for-profits would not be able to form a consortium. So the consortium should be led by a private company.
Right. Then about the clean cooking services and technologies. So I have 3 questions here about that. So first one goes, are people in rural or remote areas eligible for funding?
Absolutely. So MCFA does not place any specific criteria on the location of the end customers beyond the project countries, of course. So definitely yes.
Good. And how about renewable energy sources? Does MCFA fund production of renewable energy sources?
Yes, especially biofuels. We're particularly interested in biofuels, liquid, solid, and gas. The purpose of the MCFA is really to support clean cooking services. And this means that we even require that there's sufficient fuel supply. You should demonstrate that there's sufficient fuel supply identified and available for the end end customers. So we also support and prioritize a so-called tool and fuel business model, where both the stove as well as the fuel are provided by the same company or by a consortium member. So you could have a consortium member who provides the fuel and the tool could be provided by the investee. So in the financial offer that we briefly touched upon, we hope to level the playing field for the tool and fuel models so that the CapEx investment going into the fuel supply can be taken into account. And just to say that the applicants do have a high level of agency about the use of funds, so we're not prescriptive on the use of funds.
Thank you. And then about LPG, so liquefied petroleum gas. So why is LPG not supported in Kenya or in Zimbabwe?
So the background for the LPG question in MCFA is that it was excluded as an eligible fuel or technology in the MCFA 1. So this evaluation of the first funding round I mentioned took a look also at inclusion of LPG in this new funding round. And the evaluation essentially concluded that supporting LPG in Kenya or in Zimbabwe would not add much value because there is already a quite well-functioning market for this fuel. So this was rather a conscious decision taken on the basis of the recommendations from that evaluation.
Thank you. Then we have a question about project countries. So why is MCFA only focused on a few sub-Saharan countries? Namely DRC, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Tanzania, Zambia and Zimbabwe?
Okay, this is a very simple question to answer. The project country selection reflects the donors' priorities and preferences. The project countries were not chosen by Nefco. And I would also just like to mention that Malawi is a new country in this round. So we're very keen to hear from project developers and project owners in Malawi.
Thank you. And then we have received questions in the chat. So I'm just going to read it here. The first one is from Michael in Kenya. There are several projects in Sub-Saharan Africa supporting private sector using results-based financing to accelerate higher-tier cooking. So how is Nefco working with other development partners to prevent double support and double reporting?
Of course, we try to assess all the applications on their merits, and we take a careful look at the other type of funding that these projects have received. We do take a look at the additionality of the funding and the contribution that the MCFA can make to those investments. In terms of coordination, we have undertaken a quite detailed market scan, and we were very familiar with many of the other programs in the field. We also take into account the fact that many of these funding instruments support projects at different stages. So, for instance, there are other programs which support clean cooking at early stages. So they're working with startups and early stage companies, but we're very much focused on scaling. So we tend to come in a bit later in the funding cycle.
Right, thank you. The second question is from Isaac Danford from Consumers' Choice. Is it possible to include funds obtained from other results-based financing-based donors as part of co-financing?
I can answer this one. So basically, results-based financing from other donor programs is for us parallel financing, especially if it's intended for the same uses as the MCFA financing. So no, it is not accepted as co-financing.
Thank you. And third question is about civil society. So will civil society be involved in the project implementations?
Definitely, yes. As mentioned, civil society organizations can be consortium members or project partners that have joined forces together with the private sector applicant.
And moving on, you guys have been very active online. That's great. How can MCFA support the creation of clean energy policies in the countries where it works?
Yeah, well, we do have a funding line that can support governments. In fact, we're working already with Zambia in this context to support the development of a clean cooking strategy for that country. So, on a case-by-case basis, we can look at those funding possibilities as well in the countries of operation, of course.
Thanks. And then the next question is from Arun. If a Pan-African company wants to apply for 3 of the eligible project countries, should it submit 3 applications from 3 registered entities?
Essentially, yes. We need a application for each of the countries from each of the applicants or the future counterparty of Nefco, with who Nefco possibly signs a contract. So yes.
Good. And the next question is from Madalitso in Malawi. Is it eligible to include different technologies, for instance, LPG and EPCs in one application?
Yes, it is. We don't place any criteria on whether the applicant should focus only on selling one technology, but of course, capacity aspects and distribution channel aspects and so forth should be considered by the applicants.
And then I think we still have room for one more. So this is from Nicola from Italy. Can the applicant register the project in Vera system for carbon credit generation purpose?
Yes, of course. We strongly support the use of carbon finance. We're very familiar with a number of our existing investees and applicants who are looking to do that. So we would encourage that. Yes.
Thank you.
And under certain circumstances, we can also fund that as well. So if companies are looking for financing for registration or the covering of transaction costs.
Good. Thanks. Yeah. Great. Thanks for all your questions. But now it's time to wrap up our webinar. So as mentioned, the recording and the presentation will be available afterwards on our website, moderncooking.africa. And on our website, you can also find important updates regarding the ongoing funding round, as well as the MCFA in general. And as a reminder, the deadline for the pre-qualification stage questions is on 12th of January, tomorrow. And you can submit questions in the SmartMe application portal by using the support section. I would also like to remind you to sign up for the MCFA newsletter and to follow MCFA on social media to get the latest updates. Thank you for your time and participations, and have a great rest of your day.